Namaste. My name is Partha Majumdar. This presentation is from my semester 4 project as part of the master's program in Indian Knowledge System at the Bhishma School of Indic Studies. Apart from a student of uh, Indian Knowledge System, I also hold a doctorate in data sciences. My effort in this project is to bring together these two distinct domains, applying the methods of data science to the study of Indian knowledge systems. I believe this convergence has the potential to open up entirely new field of study, one where computational tools can illuminate patterns and insights in our ancient texts. This particular focus of this thesis is the computational analysis of two Puranas, the Viṣṇu-Purāṇa and the Narasiṁha-Purāṇa. Through this work, I aim to demonstrate how data-driven tools and methods can reveal narrative and theological emphasis in these texts, complementing and extending traditional approaches of philology and theology. To situate this project, let us first consider the background. The Puranas are a vast narrative, theological, and cosmological texts that have centered to the Indian knowledge system traditions for centuries. Traditionally, these works have been studied through philology and theology approaches that focus on language, meaning, doctrinal interpretations. While these are invaluable, they all often overlook structural and quantitative patterns in these texts. With the rise of digital humanities, new perspectives are emerging. Computational tools allow us to examine large corpora in ways they were not possible before, uncovering frequency distributions, co-occurrences, and patterns of emphasis. The aim of my project is therefore to combine Indian knowledge systems with data science using the strength of both to identify patterns in the Puranas that may not be evident through traditional approaches alone. With that background in mind, let us now turn to the research problem. The central question I asked was this: can computational tools meaningfully reveal narrative and theological emphasis in the Puranas? To frame this inquiry, I began with a null hypothesis that the distribution of references to deities, persons, and places in these texts is diffuse, without a clear concentration. In other words, the assumption was that the mentions might be spread evenly across a wide range of figures. But the real research question was sharper. Do certain figures actually dominate and in doing so shape the theology and narrative structure of these Puranas? If so, computational methods could help us quantify and visualize these patterns, thereby complementing traditional philological and theological approaches. To address this problem, I formulated a set of clear objectives for the study. The first step was to build a tokenized corpora of the Viṣṇu-Purāṇa and the Narasiṁha-Purāṇa. This means preparing the text in a computationally usable form, broken down into tokens that can be analyzed systematically. Next, I sought to identify the entities in this corpora, specifically deities, persons, and places. These categories were essential because they represent the theological, narrative, and cosmological dimensions of the texts. The third objective was to construct co-occurrence networks. By looking at how these entities appear in proximity of one another, I could map the relationship and see which figures are most central. Finally, I aim to compare the two Puranas in terms of their narrative and theological emphasis. The comparison helps highlight not only their unique orientation but also the broader patterns that emerge when computational tools are applied to Purāṇic literature. Now let me describe the corpus on which the analysis was performed. The primary source of this study was digital versions of Viṣṇu-Purāṇa and Narasiṁha-Purāṇa accessed from the Gretel digital library. These are available for SLP1 transliteration scheme, which is widely used computational process for Sanskrit. The Viṣṇu-Purāṇa corpus, after cleaning and tokenizing, amounted to about 77,900 tokens, while the Narasiṁha-Purāṇa corpus contained about 46,200 tokens. To prepare the data, I carried out cleaning and tokenization. This included standardizing this transliteration, applying regular expression to detect relevant entity patterns, and performing normalization so that orthographic variants of the same word could be grouped together. Finally, the tokens were computed and then normalized to proportional measures such as frequency per thousand tokens. This was necessary to make the meaningful comparison between two corpora which are significantly different in size. In the next stage, I focused on entity recognition and network construction. First, I began with a set of seed lists of known deities, persons, and places. Using these starting points, I applied regular expression based tolerant matching so that variants in spelling and case endings could be captured. From these matches, I also looked at surrounding context in the text. This allowed me to discover additional entities that were not initially in the seed list but were semantically and contextually important. For analyzing relationships, I applied co-occurrence windows of plus or minus 12 tokens. This means that if two entities appear within a span of 12 tokens, they were considered to co-occur. Finally, I constructed a network where the nodes represent the entities and the edges represent the co-occurrence frequencies. This gave a structural view of how narrative and theological figures interact within each Purana. Let us now look at the results from Viṣṇu-Purāṇa. One of the strongest findings is that Hari was overwhelmingly dominant among the deity references. Interestingly, the name Vishnu itself is not as frequent. Instead, Vishnu is invoked primarily through epithets such as Hari, Janardana, Keshava, Govinda, etc. This shows how the text prefers devotional invocation rather than direct naming. At the same time, Brahma emerges as a consistent counterpoint. His presence balances the narrative, especially in cosmological discussions. On the personal side, the entire structure of the text is driven by the dialogue between Parashara and Maitreya, who dominate person references by a large margin. As for places, they surprisingly sparse. The only significant location that stands out is Hiranyakashipur, which reflects the centrality of Narasimha episode within the Puran. Overall, the Viṣṇu-Purāṇa shows a clear concentration around Vishnu, though through epithets. Lord Brahma as a cosmological partner and Parashara and Maitreya dialogue as the framing device. Turning now to the Narasiṁha-Purāṇa, the results show a very different pattern compared to the Viṣṇu-Purāṇa. Where here the Vishnu is explicitly named right at the top, unlike in the Viṣṇu-Purāṇa where the epithets dominated. This suggests a stronger devotional emphasis on the direct identity of Vishnu. In terms of person, Sutta takes a central stage as a dominant narrative voice. This follows the traditional Purāṇic style of oral recitation, with Vyasa and Narada appearing in supporting roles. As for places, the geography is extremely minimal, with Swarga, the celestial realm, appearing as the main location. This indicates that Narasiṁha-Purāṇa is less concerned with earthly or pilgrimage geography and more focused on theological cosmological dimensions. Overall, the Narasiṁha-Purāṇa is narrower in scope but much sharper in focus, placing Lord Vishnu at the center and framing narrative through authoritative voice of the sutta. Now let us look at the co-occurrence structure. On the left is the Viṣṇu-Purāṇa. What we see here is a much broader mesh. The network is spread out, reflecting its dialogical structure between Parashara and Maitreya, with multiple deities references woven into conversation. This creates a more interconnected narrative fabric. On the right is the Narasiṁha-Purāṇa. Here the network is noticeably tighter and takes a star-like shape. The structure revolves primarily around Lord Vishnu and the sutta, with few cross-links among other entities. This shows how the text compresses its focus on a few dominant figures rather than dispersing attention broadly. Together, these visuals confirm the stylistic differences. One Purana offers dialogical breadth, while the other prioritizes theological sharpness centered on Lord Vishnu. Now I bring together the comparative insights from both Purans. The Viṣṇu-Purāṇa presents a cosmological spread. Its narrative is dialogical, unfolding through Parashara and Maitreya, and Lord Vishnu is invoked mainly through a wide range of epithets. That reflects the teaching style, broad in scope, linking cosmology, theology, and narrative. In contrast, the Narasiṁha-Purāṇa compresses its focus into a more devotional framework. Lord Vishnu is named explicitly at the top rather than through epithets, and the oral voice of Sutta anchors the recitation. The text emphasizes concentrated devotion rather than dialogical cosmology. Yet, despite these stylistic and structural differences, we find a clear convergence. The Vishnu Brahma axis remains central in both texts, reflecting the consistent theological dialogue between creation and preservation. So, the two Puranas differ in methods and emphasis, but they align in theological backbone. They, they foreground. Now, I highlight the contribution of this study. First, it demonstrates a viability of digital humanities approaches in the field of Indian knowledge system. Computational methods can indeed reveal meaningful theological and narrative structure in the Puranas. Second, it bridges the data science with Sanskrit theology. The project is not only about text mining, but also about showing how computational analysis can serve as companion to traditional philology and hermeneutics. Third, it creates reproducible pipeline. The method developed here from tokenization to entity recognition and co-occurrence network and applied to other Puranas or even other Sanskrit journals. Finally, the study opens the scope for cross-Purāṇic comparative study. By aligning computational tools with Sanskrit traditions, we create a foundation for large-scale comparative theology, something that has not been systematically attempted before. As with any study, there are some limitations. The work is limited to just two Puranas, making it essentially a small pilot project. While the results are meaningful, they cannot yet be generalized across the entire Purāṇic tradition. Entity recognition was handled using heuristics and regular expression tolerant matrix. This works reasonably well, but more sophisticated NLP approach could refine the accuracy and reduce noise. For the future, the plan is to extend this methodology to Mahapuranas in the entirety, to employ advanced NLP methods, and to build a lexicon that can systematically capture divine names, epithets, persons, places across text. These steps will scale up this pilot into a robust, reproducible pipeline for computational Purāṇic studies. As we come to the conclusion, let me summarize the key takeaways. The analysis of Viṣṇu-Purāṇa and Narasiṁha-Purāṇa shows that theological and narrative emphases are highly concentrated, not diffuse. A few deities and narrators dominate the structure, shaping the flow of the text. This confirms a hypothesis that the Puranas are anchored in select figures, whether they are Lord Vishnu through the multiple epithets, Lord Brahma as a counterpoint, or narrators such as Parashara and Sutta. At the same time, the study raises new questions from Indology and for digital humanities. For example, how do these patterns vary across other Puranas? Can computational methods reveal sectarian tendencies or shift across redactions? Finally, this is also an invitation to scholars, technologists, and practitioners alike. I invite you to join the dialogue between data science and Indian knowledge system. This intersection has the potential to open up an entirely new field of study, and together we can shape its future direction. Namaste.